This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer. Today's guest is Jon Albert. Now, Jon is the founder and CEO of the Albert Company, the world's largest supplier of celebrity talent and popular music for advertising. Since its formation over 40 years ago, the Albert Company has advised, counseled, and quoted over 20,000 projects with industry-leading clients ranging from Intel to Ford. Additionally, Jon has served as an expert witness in dozens of cases, mainly involving unauthorized use. I'm excited to have you here today, Jon.
It's good to be here. This is unique for me. I usually, I can't even think of other interviews I do, but this one seemed interesting.
Oh, good. Well, we're really glad to have you here today. Let's jump into it. So the Albert Company, it's not an agency, correct? You actually represent advertisers.
Yes, actually, I like to compare ourselves to multiple listing real estate brokers. In other words, yes, we represent the advertiser, but we really work as an in-between person, brokering and packaging a deal, so it works for both sides.
How did you start this company? How did all of this begin?
Wow. Okay, going back to my youth.
That's right.
Okay. Originally, we started the company in '76, and the idea was we'd move to Hollywood. We'd get some actors like Vincent Price and Richard Deacon and a few people and do some generic commercials with them. In other words, you can have somebody walking down a beach and you can talk about anything, buying jewelry, buying a car, buying a house, investing for your family. And that way we could make very inexpensive, make available to small advertisers, inexpensive celebrity talent. And what happened right from the beginning is, we made up packages like, you can get 2 TV spots, 2 radio spots with Vincent Price. Well, one of the first calls we got was somebody from Iowa, a steak restaurant chain. And they said, okay, we want Vincent Price, but we don't want you to do the production. We do the production. And we don't want 2 TV spots. We want 1, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd been in advertising for years before that, so I knew all the lingo and et cetera. So they said, what would Vincent Price cost? I said, I'll get back to you. I'll let you know. I'm not going to say, how would I know? So I called Vincent Price, and they said, it's Jon Albert, and a client called, how much money would you want? And he said, well, I'd probably do that for, $9,000, I guess. Okay, so I called the client back and I said, well, he wants 10 grand. And they said, okay. Nice. So we made our first $1,000 or so.
Sure.
And it turned out nobody really wanted the packages that we offered, but they wanted the celebrity talent. Next thing you know, about 2 or 3 years later, we were the largest provider of celebrity talent in the country and doing major work with major agencies. It was just filling a void and a need that was there, which we weren't even really aware of. Just happened.
Wow.
I couldn't have figured it out.
Huh. That's such a great story. So you have to have been one of the first companies doing this, right? Was there anyone else acting as an intermediary in that manner?
There was at the time. I really won't mention the name. Doesn't matter. Sure. But we came in with a very not an individual approach, but a very corporate approach. I think we had, after the first 2 years or so, we had about a dozen employees. We put a ad in Advertising Age that was double truck. Right across the Staples, 2 pages. We hired an ad agency to do that. And I remember just what it says. The headline, and we had everybody in there from Ed McMahon to, we showed several dozen celebrities that we had worked with. And at the top, I remember what it said. It said, others may promise the moon. Berg Albert Corporation delivers the stars.
That's good.
And it just went over huge. That's when people read Ad Age cover to cover. Everybody did. And it was thick,
Sure.
Long
Pretty
time
strong. So how did you turn that experience into a career as an expert witness? How do those two things connect?
Well, expert witness is still a side career. I mean, it's not what I do full time. But I've done, I think, about 60 some cases on the last, I don't know, what's it, since 1989, however long that is, 30 some years.
Sure.
I remember what happened is Rick Hirsch, who used to be head of commercials in the U.S. at William Morris Agency, great guy. And he's doing things independently now. And he called me up and he said, hey, they called me here at William Morris to ask if I'd be interested in being an expert witness in a case. But William Morris does not allow its employees to be expert witnesses. First off, we can never testify, they can't testify against talent. That's not cool. And it just would be kind of weird. Plus, they wouldn't be believable witness because if they went in as an expert and they represent celebrities, well,
conflict of interest.
That look like it's objective? Of course not. So he said, I wanted to, and I'd done a lot of deals with him. He said, I'd like to suggest you for it. Are you interested? And that's how it started. I said, yeah, sure. Why not? Never done it before. Didn't know anything about it. And the rest was history. I enjoyed it. Actually, it was a great break from what I normally do. I was on debate team in high school and chess player, and all that seemed to fit in to being an expert witness, especially the debate side.
Sure.
Yeah, because there's a lot of the same attributes and talents that you need for each, I think.
So going back to that first experience, did you feel prepared for the case? Were you ready? How did they first prepare you? And then, going forward, as you've done, like you said, dozens of cases, how have you improved?
Wow. I will have to say, I was completely unprepared for the first case. I'd never done it before. I'd never seen an expert witness testify before. I had no idea what you do first, that there's an expert report and then a deposition and then a trial, and there's negotiations likely for settlement, et cetera. And probably that was good, because if I knew all that and knew what I didn't know, I would have probably been afraid to do it. But I went in confident. So at that point in 89, we'd already been in business for 13 years. And we were the leader, and I felt very confident about what I knew. I mean, I knew that I didn't know if I was the number one negotiator, but we were, and I was way ahead of whoever was number two, because we were doing the most. We had a great reputation, et cetera. So I went in overly confident, just because I figured, well, if they do is just going to tell the truth. They want my opinion, so that's what I'll do. It actually, I believe the first case was Bette Midler. If you remember, I think it was Ford,
right? Yeah, I remember the case.
And I was in, I think, on the appeal to that case. And I was in on behalf of Bette Midler. Yeah, that was my first case.
That's a seminal case. I believe that was the case where they used her likeness.
Oh, a sound-alike.
Right, a sound-alike.
They told the singer, try to sound like Bette Midler.
Right.
So, yes. I mean, they were caught dead to rights, Yeah.
Right. Yeah, she prevailed in that case. So you were on the winning side on your first case.
Actually, I don't know any case that I haven't been. Seriously.
Is that right?
I think I've always been on the winning side. Yeah. Well, which is something I think I should probably share. I think you had asked me once, what are the basics, at the beginning of a case. And I think it'd be a good time to bring that up. What I look for, like that first conversation with an attorney, because I think this is why I've always been on the winning side. I look to know the basics of the case. What happened? Why did it happen? And then I can think, hey, wait a minute, you're sort of in the wrong here. Oh, really? Well, maybe we don't want to use you. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I might ask them, well, what are you looking for? And they have some relatively unknown talent, and they want to get, $50 million. Well,
Right.
wait a minute. I really, I don't think I can do that for you.
So this is prior to accepting,
Exactly.
Okay. So this is you deliberating on whether or not you want to work with an attorney.
At the same time, because in that initial conversation, usually now a Zoom call, they're deciding whether to use me.
Right.
Do they like the way I look? Do they like the way I sound? Do I have the right background and attributes that they're looking for? So, yes, and one of the things I look at, does this fit my area of expertise? Because sometimes it doesn't. And I'll just say, I'm not really an expert in that. I have opinions on it, but I wouldn't call myself an expert. And I know at that point, I really don't want to do the case because opposing counsel is going to destroy me. Why would you go into a situation like that where you're really not an expert? So I think that's one of the reasons that my clients have been successful is they have good cases, and I don't go in not knowing what I'm doing.
Do you turn down a significant number of cases?
No, I would
Okay.
not. It's a very small percent because usually the people that come to me, they kind of know who I am. Maybe their law firm has used me before, or they've called a law firm. And most of the law firms that I've worked for, not most, many of them are major firms because that's who represents major advertisers, major talent. And they're often well-known firms, and they know how to pick their experts and who to call to find out, who to use as an expert. Make a reference. Yeah.
So okay, so let's go back to the preparation and what you've learned since the beginning. So how now having been through dozens and dozens of cases, what are the things that attorneys do well? What would you say to attorneys who are working with experts for the first time? How do you better prepare a new witness, somebody who's never done it before?
All I know is I can't say how they should prepare their experts. I can just say how they should prepare or not prepare me. What works for me? Well, if somebody it's their second time doing it or whatever, or it's an attorney that really is not familiar with using experts, I can't really advise them actually, but I think they can glean from my experience, and that will provide some advice in a secondary manner. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I look for in the relationship with the law firm is first that they trust the expert's expertise. Right. They need to trust me. I don't want to be arguing with them about, which I haven't, about the way things should be or whatever. And they can't change my outlook.
Right.
I won't let them change it. I mean, I'm not saying I'm intractable. I'm just saying that sometimes they'll want to bend a case so it fits what they're trying to get at. But then I realize that doesn't really fit my experience. It doesn't fit my opinion. So they need to trust me. They need to be supportive. They need to provide me all the materials I need, like all the previous contracts that the celebrity's been involved with. They need to show respect, which they all do. I like it when they ask smart questions, because as you can see, I give long answers. I don't give short answers. If an attorney said, well, in the deposition, give short answers, you got the wrong guy. For two reasons. I like to be complete, and that usually can't be in one sentence or 5 words. And also, as I often explain to them, that a jury and a judge really don't know much about celebrity contracts. They may know about other things, but most people don't have a clue what goes in them, what the industry standards are, et cetera. So I feel that it's important for me to sort of, in effect, act as an educator.
Okay.
So when I answer a question, I'll usually give a little background for it so opposing counsel understands why I am saying what I am saying. And then later the judge and jury will understand, because they really don't understand the business. So I have to give a little background on, what's the culture like, if you will.
So you have to walk a bit of a line then between being an expert, but also being, explaining things in a manner that lay people will understand what you're trying to get across. Is that right?
Absolutely. And that's fine. I don't think I use any legalese in expert reports. And if an attorney wants to suggest some language, I'll say, well, you can suggest a thought. That's great. But I am not going to use your legal language because everybody would know that's fake. I don't speak like that, et cetera, unless I'm negotiating an agreement with someone and say, well, you should put this in it. But even then, I'm not going to say whereas and hereby. And give me a break. Give everybody a break. So, yeah, but it is a fine line. And one of the reasons I think the clients, meaning advertisers, have always liked our agreements is that anybody can read them and understand it. And the attorney that first worked for us and any attorneys that do work for us now are directed. Write this in language that when somebody on a production staff at an ad agency can refer to the contract, know what they can do and not do, and they don't have to call their attorney and say, gee, would you read page 37 and interpret this for us? Our agreements are much shorter, and anybody with education knows exactly what's going on. Yeah.
When you're dealing with opposing counsel, you had an interesting piece of insight in a letter that we were exchanging before. You said that half of the time they're scary and half of the time they're friendly to disarm, the witnesses. But the real piece of insight was that they try and get you kind of in the back half when you start to run out of blood sugar, and to and that your strategy is to have some cookies. So I would love to hear more about that.
Okay. I love the way you put your questions too. You obviously have thought these out very well. In fact, this would definitely be advice to newbies acting as an expert witness, especially, or experienced people, although they may know this by now. Also, attorneys might want to know this, that we're not stupid. We're, maybe some experts are, but anybody that's done a bunch of cases, come on, we know what's going on here. What I'm saying is never, ever, ever, ever trust opposing counsel. Now, they all have their techniques. Maybe they learn it in depositions 404 in law school. I don't know. But they all have their techniques. One can be to try to be intimidating and very businesslike and intimidating. Well, Mr. Albert, okay, fine. You're not my teacher. You're not my dad. And you can talk to me that way, but it's not how it's going into my brain. Or they can be really friendly, why would they be friendly to me? The point here is they're there for one reason in that deposition. And that is to show I am a liar and or a fool and or a fake. And they're there to try to either destroy me that day or set me up to try to destroy me in court. Find contradictions. Find where I've made up an answer and I really didn't know what I was talking about. Look for lies, whatever, trip you up, ask questions with double meanings, whatever. They're not there to gain information, just gain information. Very well, we just want to gain some background here today about the case. Not true. They're there to figure out how to completely destroy me in front of a jury and destroy any expert. That's their job. I get that. But I think experts need to know that. They'll use different techniques for that, to disarm you by being friendly, to intimidate you. What you had mentioned about blood sugar, one of the things I have found over the years, the first few hours of a deposition are usually really easy, simple stuff. Then you come back after a lunch break, and most of them for me last 6 to 8 hours. The shortest I've ever been in, when it was recent, was an hour and 15 minutes. I was shocked. An hour and 15 minutes, that's usually the introduction. So you get back from lunch, they question you for an hour or so, everything's fine. And then about 2:33 in the afternoon, they hit you with the hard stuff. The entrapments, the ambushes, whatever, the deep stuff. I always sense it when that happens. I always have some chocolate chip cookies or some ginger snaps there, soft ones, so I'm not crunching. And I eat those like every 20 or 30 minutes as it's going on, because they know about blood sugar levels, and they've already tried to wear you down for 5 hours, et cetera. Now they're going to hit you with the hard stuff. You have to be the sharpest you are. The sharpest you are all day is the sharpness you have to be in the afternoon, because that's when the tough stuff's going to come. At least it always has for me. That's when they say the big questions, the ones where they're trying to get you to say something that shouldn't be said. You got to keep your sugar up. You got to keep cool. But we can get to that later. I'll keep that answer short.
Do you have any, do you have any stories? Do you have any anecdotes to share with us that kind of illustrate some of these points? Any specific cases? I know that you can't, necessarily talk about the specific people involved, but are there any specific cases that really stick in your head as either being difficult or something really worked for you or didn't work for you as a witness?
Well, I can think of a couple pop into my head, and I won't give any details. I don't want anybody angry from things that happened years ago. Once I was being deposed by an attorney, very famous one, famous name. This guy, he gets up from his chair and he's walking over, and I'm sitting there and he's towering over me. Well, Mr. Albert, blah, 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 blah. Very intimidating. The counsel that I'm working for keeps objecting. Hey, you should sit down. Sit down. Don't intimidate my clients. Or my client, my expert, whatever. I just sort of waved at the attorney I was working for, like, putting my palm of my hand down, like, don't worry, it's cool. It's cool. Because I know it's just theatrics. It's the guy's style a few hours into a deposition. So I just remained calm, like he wasn't even there, drove him crazy. Finally, on his own, he sort of huffs and goes and sits back down in his chair. So the point being, for other experts, is don't ever get rattled. If you do, it's because somebody sucked you in to being rattled, to disarm you, to confuse you. Just be calm about it. They're not going to beat you up. Be calm, think, make like it's not even happening. I also remember going into a major deposition, major names in it. And this was quite a few years ago. And when I walked into opposing counsel's office in a major city, there was a big conference table that was set up for the deposition. They seat me. I look up, and I'm looking at a window with the sun coming in that's in my eyes. Mm-hmm. Like, what am I, a moron? Like, I don't know this was purposeful. Also, they had a camera with a lens that must have been 6 inches wide, a video camera, that honestly couldn't have been more than 1.5 or 2 feet from my face. I said to them, I don't like the seat I'm in. It's before deposition started. And there were several attorneys there from this law firm. I don't like the seat I'm in because the sun's in my eyes. There's a lot of glare. And also, I'm not going to be deposed with a camera 1.5 feet from my face. That's discomforting. They said, well, the room's already set up. And that just tweaked something in me. So very calmly, I remember I stood up out of my chair, stood up and said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to go to the bathroom for 5 minutes, going to the men's room. When I come back, I'm going to have a different chair, and the camera's going to be at the opposite end of the table. or I leave. Well, sir, you can't leave because it's our deposition. I said, no, it's my deposition, and it's not being taken under this circumstance. I went to the bathroom. I came back in 5 minutes. I was at the head of the table, looking at a dark side towards the dark part of the room, and the camera was about 15 feet away from me. Point being, I would say to experts, it's not opposing counsel's deposition. They're not in control. They may be able to say when the breaks are taken and certain things like that. It's your deposition as the expert. You have to be comfortable. You have to feel good about it. And there's certain ground rules you can't give in on, because all of those things are to intimidate you, to throw you off base. Don't buy into it.
So as an expert, it's important for you to advocate for yourself.
And our client and your client.
And your client. And do you
yourself.
think that and do you think that the attorney that's on your side, the attorney that you are representing or you are with, needs to take a more proactive role? In other words, should he have stepped in that situation and said, no, my expert isn't going to sit in this, with the sun right in his face next to a camera?
I think that, yes, an attorney should do that. However, I don't look for them to do that. Honestly, I don't look for the attorney I'm working for to do anything in a deposition, except during the breaks to say something to me if they need to. They'll say, hey, you're doing great, whatever, or I might have a question for them. I would just assume, except for the objections they need to raise, which of course they need to put objections on the record or comments, what have you. I just assume they not do anything. I feel I'm old enough now and confident enough that if I'm uncomfortable with something or the way a question's stated, I say it. Because I don't really give a darn what opposing counsel thinks of me.
Sure.
I'm not, they don't know that. I don't come on like a prima donna or a big shot or no, not at all. I'm usually just relatively humble. I'm sort of like, a guy I always liked on TV was Tom Brokaw as a reporter, because he was so respected and so powerful, but always soft-spoken. And I just like that Midwestern sort of thing. I'm from the Midwest. Don't get upset. You don't have to get confrontive. You don't have to do that. Just say what you mean, mean what you say. Say, walk softly, carry a big stick, and don't give in on anything. Anything.
Sure. That's
unless the attorney you're working for says you should, but it hasn't happened. Right. I think go in and respect yourself and don't fear opposing counsel. However, I think that requires that a witness be confident in themselves as to their expertise. If they feel they're only 85% a good expert, they shouldn't be being an expert witness, because, boy, that could be an embarrassing, horrible experience for them. Because typically, at least in my case, the cases, opposing counsel are really good. They're usually the best in the business. I mean, they're representing major corporations or major talent. They're not, they know what they're doing. And if you don't feel you know what you're doing, then don't do it.
Right. And they've probably done some oppositional research on you as an expert to try and impeach you.
They will probably go to the internet, find this interview, and say, oh, Albert's going to eat his cookies, or oh, he's expecting me to do this way or that way. Well, and they probably will. If they're good attorneys, they'll probably hear this interview. So I'm not going to let too many secrets out.
So, let's pivot to another thing that you had mentioned in one of our exchanges, which is time management. And this was interesting to me. You said you don't worry about it too much because you cull the things that are unimportant. Tell me a little bit more about, getting to what's important and not spinning your own wheels and wasting too much time on stuff that's not.
And typically, by the way, I don't charge hourly for expert work. Occasionally I will if there's some very special work I have to do. I charge a retainer, for which I go through all those phone calls, Zoom calls. I read that FedEx box of materials that they send me, etc. And that takes it right up to doing doing the expert report. So I don't charge for hours for that. I anticipate in advance, and I include that in a retainer. So they also don't feel they're being no attorney would feel they're being overcharged or that hours are being padded, because I don't want to even go there. As far as time management, I don't manage my time. I'm more like when there's a deadline. In other words, expert report must be filed by March 18th. Fine. I'll ask the attorney, when would you like a draft? Well, we'd like it the first week in February. Fine. I get it to him first week in February on time. I look for, if I know a deposition is, let's say, March 1st, I don't start preparing for it on February 1st, because the truth is you can't remember things for a month. You cannot remember. I mean, maybe some people can. I can't. I'm not going to remember details for a month. I put it out of my mind. Now, I'll take phone calls from an attorney. They might want to discuss things a little bit or have a question, but I don't bother with it. Couple weeks, 2-3 weeks before deposition, I start going over materials. A few days before, I'm a different person. I'm detail oriented. I'm like I'm in the middle of a debate. Questions come to me while I'm in bed that I may be asked by opposing counsel. What I do is I charge a flat rate for deposition. If a deposition is canceled, let's say they set it for March 1, and on March 12, they say, we're going to postpone it until June. Well, you're going to pay me for the March 1 deposition. Why? Because I already put a week of prep in.
Sure.
So understand that when or maybe the case settles. Had cases settle days or hours before a deposition. Well, you still got to pay me for the deposition. I'm sharing this with people so they don't walk away thinking, God, I did all that work and I didn't get paid for it. They settled. The deposition didn't happen. You got to look out for yourself.
Do you think in general it's advantageous to work, on a retainer rather than hourly as an expert?
Well, I know for me it is. But I realize that for a lot of experts, the way the system's set up, the way a lot of attorneys work, or most, they work hourly. It's all they understand. Mm-hmm. Only once, in my recollection, did somebody insist that it be hourly. And the reason is because an insurance company was paying for me. I think I was working for the defendant, and the insurance company was paying for me, and they would only accept it as hourly. Okay, fine. So I did it hourly. Came out the same. Sure. But I did it hourly.
Jon, before we wrap up, do you have any parting advice, other things that you'd like to say to any attorneys in particular or new experts just starting out?
Yeah, I'd give 2 pieces of advice. And it's why, believe me, I don't say this in pride. The Lord over my life has taken all the pride out of me. So this, as humble as it can be, there's no pride in this. You will always be successful in a deposition. And by successful, I mean, you're not going to be embarrassed. You're not going to get trapped. You're not going to be made to look like a fool if you just do 2 things. And they seem very simple. And most people don't want to do it. A, tell the truth. Not 99% of the time, 100%. Tell the truth. You can never be trapped if you tell the truth. Second, never kind of make up an answer so you look like an expert, sound like one, or want to look smart. Counsel asks a question, opposing counsel. If you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know, or that's not my area of expertise. Well, but what would your opinion be? I really don't feel I should even give one because I'm not an expert in traffic accidents. I'm not going to, why would I make, as a human, I have an opinion, but who cares? Don't make anything up. Always tell the truth and say the truth shall set you free. You can't get tripped up if you tell the truth. including if you don't know what the answer is. Just say, I don't know. Haven't come across that.
That's sage advice. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Jon.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.